Story begin. Our protagonist wakes up and asks about the noise. A girl screams asking who he is. The protagonist does not understand anything and the girl asks him what he has done to her before that. He remembers being in the middle of the macrocosm in a decisive battle against the three supreme lords. He has a headache and some unknown recollections come to his mind as he sees how they beaten and disrespected him, and he concludes that he was reincarnated into a mortal body on Earth. The girl snaps him out of his studies and tells him he'll have to take responsibility for taking her first time. At that moment they hear some men's voices outside the door, and these guys mention that she's one of the top business women and try to betray her fiancé because she reserved a hostel room with the dumb son of the family. Our protagonist, she does not know how they set up out she was there, and if her fiancé finds out she'll surely die. The protagonist says it's a trap and the proprietor of that body actually did not do anything to her. Both of them lost knowledge after drinking a opiate drink and were thrown out onto the same bed. He wants to know who would do commodity like that to the proprietor of that body. One of the guys outdoors mentions that Master Yahoo gave that information. The protagonist delves into the recollections of that body and manages to see who they were pertaining to and who betray him. He uses his power to move around the megacity and reaches a remote place where he laughs and walks down. The intelligencers break into the room looking for the protagonist, but they do not see him, and the girl does not know how he faded. And Auto Yahoo is happy because he thinks they discovered the protagonist and the girl in the room, which will blemish the social image of the protagonist. His laquery tells him he's veritably smart for not killing him and for ruining his character. Rather, on the phone he says that they're the intelligencers he transferred to the room. His face changes upon entering the news and he communicates to Yahoo that the protagonist wasn't in the room. He prodigies how this is possible since he locked them up himself in the room. Meanwhile, while Yahoo is talking on the phone, the protagonist approaches him and asks, are you a direct assignee of the family and did you plan this? Yahoo admits and says he did everything for the family heritage and tells the protagonists that he's a waste for the family, and since he ruined his plan he will kill him with his own hands. When Yahoo attacks the protagonist he shows him his satanic power, which fears Yahoo, who does not know what it, so he decides to flee. In the auto, Yahoo says he will take vengeance, but the motorist tells him that there's commodity on the roof. The protagonist has planted a kind of seal that activates from a distance, and after it's actuated the auto blasts. And Yahoo or the motorist slightly manage to jump out of the auto before the blast to save their lives. On the ground, Yahoo thinks the protagonist is involved with a demon. To the protagonist, Yahoo is just an ant, so he decides to show mercy, but if he gets in his way again, he will surely kill him. He goes to a near swash and wonders how the demon Earth will be. Someone named Huang is seen in his last recollections, a beautiful girl. He prodigies if she also managed to be revived, but he believes she didn't die and that he'll see her again as Demon King in the shortest quantum of time. He enters the water, releasing his air, saying that this body is still veritably weak, but the Earth has numerous living beings, so he'll take their life force. He uses a fashion called the soul-devouring art, and only the dead river fish can be seen on the water's face. In the morning on the beachfront there is an old man fumbling still with his granddaughter. His granddaughter tells him his health just better, but he shouldn't be fumbling. The old man tells her not to worry because he's stronger than ever. His sentry also tells her not to worry because the old man was the king of the Sharp Brand Squad. When he was in the army, she thinks it's okay because the old man is the king of dog faces, and so is her uncle. Both of them can fight against experts alone, and the old man catches commodity big, but rather of a big fish. It's immortal. His guards suppose it's an adversary, and they go straight to attack, but he reduces them as if nothing. The proto-agonist asks the reason for the attack. The bodyguard does not believe he single-handedly dealt with all the guards. Another bone of them jumps and launches an attack, but he blocks it without moving an inch. So they decided to attack him together and charge. The protagonist realizes that the Joe was strong and should not underrate the Earth. The protagonist calls them and says they ruined his clothes, so it's only fair that they pay him for new bones. The old man realizes that the protagonist isn't there to attack, so he apologizes and says that he will logically pay for the damages. He asks for the protagonist's name and if they could be musketeers. The protagonist tells him his last name is he, but they can't be musketeers because the old man doesn't have important time left. On top of the old man there's a kind of life bar, and he only has 3 bars left. The old man asks what he means. The protagonist tells him that he's presently look like full of energy and glowing, but he's about to die also. The protagonist leaves. The old man's granddaughter yells at him that numerous big shots people would like to be the old man's friend and he shouldn't talk to him roughly. The protagonist turns and tells her it was only a friendly warning and it depends on them if they want to believe it or not. The old man says that he felt like an ancient fierce beast, as if it could kill him with a single cutlet, and the old man's instincts are always accurate. The old man warns his guards that he is dangerous, reminding him of the fabulous existence of the Ace Squad, the god of war of that squadron. His granddaughter asks him to see the swash where all the fish were formerly dead. On the way to the academy, the protagonist realizes that the proprietor of that body has a veritably bad character. Among the scholars he notices a couple standing behind him. The protagonist mentions that this girl used to be the gal of that body, but she broke up with him after meeting this Joe we'll call Rain. The golden boy tells the protagonist that he has come notorious throughout the megacity due to the rumors of his involvement With the beautiful chairman and hostel room and numerous families are looking for him to finish him off, the protagonist tells him that if he is finished talking he'll leave the golden boy. Becomes angry because he was ignored, and protagonist responds that he does not have time to hear the sound of a justice. His ex-girlfriend tells him to kneel down, and also she'll asks the golden boy not to hit him this time for the sake of how they used to be together. Golden boy thinks the protagonist is angry because he stole his gal and tells him that he did not earn her. We see many recollections of the bifurcation. The protagonist responds that this girl is not worth of his wrathfulness, and he seems to have a strong appetite as he treats the scrap he threw down like a treasure. The golden boy gets angry, tells the protagonist that she loves him to death, and insults him, telling him he's a piece of trash that no bone wants the ex-girlfriend way in, and screams at him that he is trash and he'll be a lonely canine until he dies. But the protagonist does not watch and congratulates them on being a bastard together. The golden boy gets angry there and warns him that if he takes one further step he is dead. The granddaughter of the same old man from my family intervenes and tells them that the Fang is her swain, and if anyone dares to touch him they will be her adversary. They do not understand why the university's #1 beauty is with the university's #1 trash. The protagonist does not like what she did but does not say anything. The golden boy apologizes because he'd no way dare to go against that family. She calls the protagonist darling and asks if they can leave now. The protagonist walks down and approaches the golden boy. He tells him that he was lucky, and if he really values his life he should not mess with him, and her partner was Augusto, so he thanks him for taking over. The ex-girlfriend tells him that what he is saying is not true. Golden hits her and says she's a habituated toy at the university lot or academy. By asks him how he plans to thank her for her help. The protagonist tells her that he has no power or plutocrat. The only thing he has is his beautiful body, and he can offer to her it if she wants. She gets angry and asks if that's how he treats his rescuer. The protagonist blames her, saying that because of her fake girlfriend drama everyone now thinks he is taken, and that this may help him from getting married in the future. He demands that she must pay him for the emotional damage. By he yells at him and says that her forefather gave him a black card, but Fang responds that it was not given by her, so it's not applicable to her. She starts searching for plutocrat, but the protagonist has faded by says she believes in what he said about her forefather and wants to know who the protagonist really is. When Fang enters his classroom he is saluted with news that the Gong family is looking for him. He continues on his way and sees the same golden there between. This Joe arrives in a hurry. Let's call him Adipose. He's a good Joe and friend of Fang. He tells us Fang that he has to leave snappily because the Gong family is looking for him, and they know he's in class Fang prodigies and want to know what these ants are able of. He tells Adipose it's okay and to sit down, but Adipose continues to contend that he must leave. Fang puts his hand on Adipose's shoulder and applies some pressure to him. Adipose does not know since when he came so strong. Meanwhile the Gong family guys enters the room and asks for the protagonist. The golden takes advantage of the situation to take vengeance and snappily points Fang out. He thinks Fang is finished and that they will leave him paralyzed. Adipose gets angry, but Fang sits him down with one hand. The bald man approaches and asks Fang if he is a useless bone. The protagonist asks them if they're the trash that John called. The bald man gets angry and asks, did you say I am trash? Fang responds by saying that he heard it wrong and easily stated that all of them were trash. The bald man and his associates come angry and give Fang two options: bone to kneel and apologize, also crawl under the bald man and call him Lord Gong, or two in which they will help him by taking his one arm and one leg. The protagonist activates his satanic eyes and asks, are you sure about that? The bald man thinks what he saw was a daydream and confirms he is sure. Also the protagonist also gives them two options by activates his soul-devouring satanic eyes and controls them mentally.
Thinks Fang is finished and that they will leave him paralyzed. Fatty gets angry, but Fang sits him down with one hand. The bald man approaches and asks Fang if he's the useless one. The protagonist asks them if they are the trash that John called. The bald man gets angry and asks, did you say I'm trash? Fang responds by saying that he heard it wrong and clearly stated that all of them were trash. The bald man and his associates become angry and give Fang two options. 1. To kneel and apologize, then crawl under the bald man and call him Lord Gong. Or 2. In which they will help him by taking his one arm and one leg. The protagonist activates his demonic eyes and asks, are you sure about that? The bald man thinks what he saw was a hallucination and confirms he's sure. Then the protagonist also gives them two options by activates his soul-devouring demonic eyes and controls them mentally. He tells them to kneel. After hearing this, the blonde laughs at him for that reason, but they kneel and the blonde can't believe it on his eyes. The protagonist asks the bald man that if they were looking for Fang and tells them that the blonde is Fang. And the bald man's associates start beating him, thinking he's the one they were looking for. The blonde asks them to stop hitting him. Then they proceed to leave. Fatty can't believe what happened and asks if the protagonist is human or ghost. The protagonist turns to look and tells him that he's mistaken. He's not human nor ghost, he's a demon. The teacher arrives, shocked at the sight of the blonde, and asks what happened to him. He tells her he just fell. Class starts and the protagonist uses his eyes to see something strange about the teacher, an abnormal scent coming from her body. Violet blood, the fate of 5 paths. She actually possesses the innate spiritual physique. protagonist thinks if he can get a drop of her blood, he can create a demonic returning pill that will serve as an extra life. Feng notices a fly behind the teacher and calmly takes advantage of the situation by slapping the teacher from behind. He explains that there was a dangerous fly and that's why he killed it. However, he was kicked out of class. Despite this, he manages to get a drop of the teacher's blood from the fly. Although it wasn't much, it will be enough. The slap was worth it. But those demonic flies are only found in forbidden lands in the galaxy. He wonders who brought that fly to the Earth. At the disco, Feng asks why he was called here. Fatty tells him that his girlfriend mocked the Feng, and that's why he broke up with her. Fatty explains that he values relationships more than money or fame, and that his girlfriend had humiliated his brother so he cut her relations with her. The protagonist sees it and thinks that Fatty is a truly loyal person. Fatty said, "That beautiful waitress is Rose, the club manager, and one of the most famous bartenders in the city." Fatty ordered 2 glasses of his most famous cocktail. Rose responded, "I'll give it to you in a moment." The protagonist tells Rose, "You are poisoned." When she asked him to repeat what he said, the protagonist repeated, "You're poisoned, and the problem is going to come from the door." Just then, someone entered in bar and tells Rose that he is the only one who can save her, and if she stays with him, he will cure that poison for her. This person is known as the Poison Wolf. Rose asks who can defeat the Poison Wolf for her and promised that whoever helps her will not be charged for any drinks in the future in her bar. Then someone presents himself as the undefeated boxing king, Tiger of the black market boxing, and challenges Wolf for fight. The Wolf warns him not to get involved for his own good, but the Tiger ignores the warning. He tells the Tiger that he is undefeated because he never faced him. Then he finishes him quickly and asks if there is anyone else who wants to help Rose. If yes, then they will share the same faith as Tiger. When no one responds, the protagonist asks the Poison Wolf if he recognizes him. The wolf replies that he doesn't care who he is and tells the protagonist to get lost. Feng responds by saying, "How dare you tell me to get lost?" The wolf calls him a filthy brat, puts his hand on Feng's shoulder, but can't remove it. Feng sends the wolf flying with just one punch. The wolf is confused by the protagonist's strength. The protagonist then asks if the wolf still doesn't recognize him. The wolf responds by telling the protagonist to go to hell and launches a surprise attack, and starts laughing by thinking he wins, but despite this, the attack has no effect on Feng. Using his demonic power, Feng throws the wolf towards the wall and asks if he wants more. The wolf surrenders and says he doesn't want to fight anymore. The protagonist then asks for the antidote for Rose. The wolf breaks one of his teeth to give the protagonist the antidote, which was placed inside the teeth. At that moment, the bodyguards of the old man, who the protagonist hit earlier, enter the room. It is revealed that the bodyguard is the Poison Wolf's older brother. The wolf takes advantage of the situation and tells his brother that the protagonist is telling garbage things about him. But the bodyguard grabs the wolf head and greets Feng, calling him sir. The protagonist asks about his arm. The bodyguard thanks Feng for forgiving him and saving his arm. He explains that he came to this place specifically to find him. The protagonist asks if something has happened to the old man. The bodyguard says the old man's condition is not good and it is getting worse, and he has many black spots all over his body. He can't stand up and screams in agony at night. The protagonist realizes that these are symptoms of a demonic mosquito. The bodyguard asks if he can save the old man. The protagonist says he didn't intend to save him, but since Miss Bai helped him, he will repay the favor by helping the old man. He tells the bodyguard to come back in 3 days. The bodyguard thanks him and tells the Poison Wolf to follow the protagonist, because if he wants him to live, he will live, and if he wants him to die, he will die. The wolf kneels and says he will follow him and be his boss from now on. The protagonist tells him not to kneel before him, but in front of his friend, and apologizes to the fatty, and that he will be his boss now. The protagonist thinks about how the wolf didn't recognize him despite being from his people, but better to worry about the demonic mosquito. As the protagonist wonders where to go next, he sees a girl. The blonde. From the beginning he didn't think she would be in a place like this, so she decides to follow her a little. Suddenly, some men started to molest her, and in the end they kidnapped her with the help of a car. Upon witnessing this, the protagonist followed them. They arrived at a remote location that is the protagonist's property, and the kidnappers planned to do something to Lillian and put the blame on the protagonist. Inside the house, the kidnappers declared that they would take turns and he will be first. However, the protagonist surprised them from behind by saying it is not necessary, and they could all die together. The kidnappers did not expect the protagonist to return so soon. They ordered the third kidnapper to leave the protagonist disabled. But using his demonic powers, Feng drained him to the bones and demanded to know who had sent them by showing his demonic presence. The kidnappers begged for forgiveness and revealed it was Yahoo Plan. The protagonist tells them it is okay and they could go to hell, then drain their life force. After defeating the kidnappers, Feng discovered that one of them was carrying a jade pendant with him. When the pendant was broken, it turned out to be a celestial energy collecting magical stone. With this stone, Feng could improve his recovery speed. He goes to the back of the house and, pointing at a tree, he said that it will serve this purpose. The stone could absorb the vitality of heaven and earth for itself, and he plans to use the old tree to enhance its effectiveness. By merging the stone with the tree, Feng created a magical space system. With this system, he could increase the growth of the flowers and plants in the garden. Thanks to this, a plant spirit may be born, and he could absorb life force from it. Feng has not felt well for a while, and at that moment, Lillian appeared. Feng has forgotten about Lillian. The energy emanating from the tree was too much for Lillian's body to bear. But Lillian approaches Feng, threw herself on him, and asked why he has left her alone. She begged him not to leave her again. Feng, blushing, wondered whether to save her or not. He got on top of her and says he will first remove the energy from her body, making some doubtful sounds. The protagonist says that she still has a lot of energy in her body, so she has no choice but to do it. Lillian wakes up and sees the protagonist beside him and doesn't understand why he's there again. The protagonist tells her that he saved her and Lillian remembers everything. She asks for some clothes so she can leave and pretend nothing happened, but she realizes she took advantage of the protagonist. Then, Feng goes to find some clothes for her and asks Lillian to dress and leave. As she dresses, she asks about the place and the protagonist tells her that it's his home, Rural Junction. She asks him to take her back home, and Feng responds that there is a broken car outside. But there's a problem. The protagonist doesn't have a license. The protagonist also needs to go to the city, so he asks Lillian to drive. Lillian drives so fast intentionally to scare Feng and is surprised to see that the protagonist isn't scared. Suddenly, protagonist quickly turns the steering wheel to stop the car, and they stop. The protagonist sees a black sports car in front of them and tells Lillian that anything that happens from now on has nothing to do with her, and not to get out of the car. The protagonist is going to collect an old debt and ask some questions. The black car door opens and Yahoo comes out of the car and tells Feng that he finally found him and blames him for what happened to him by showing his face. He looks like Deadpool now and tells the protagonist that he will die and suffer in a horrible way. The protagonist advises him by telling him not to leave the hospital before getting well, and to go back and check his brain. Suddenly, Yahoo attacks Feng by using some mysterious power, but he misses his target as he is not used to this power yet. And the fight begins and they start to clash their fists. When Yahoo realizes he is going to lose, he uses his trump card by taking out a mask and putting it on his face. Then he starts to transform into a demonic-like beast. The protagonist is impressed by the change and warns Yahoo by asking, "Do you know what it is?" Yahoo replies that he knows only one thing, and that is to kill the protagonist on the spot, no matter what. The protagonist wonders how he obtained the Asura soldier's mask from the star demons. He tells him that if he reveal who gave them the mask, he will spare his life. With the mask, he can harness 20% of the Asura soldier's power, and by using mask power he manages to strike the protagonist. Yahoo begins to celebrate his victory, overflowing with power. Feng warns him that he seems unaware of the nature of the mask he is wearing, as Asura soldiers are merely low-ranking cannon fodder soldiers in the army of the star demons. Yahoo confidently says that he cannot believe Feng did not break the mask, but it's great that he can now torture him more. However, Feng approaches him and punches him in the face, cracking the mask, and mocks Yahoo, saying that if he accidentally breaks the mask. This enrages Yahoo, who declares that even if he dies, he will take Feng with him. Feng replies that he has no chance, as the outcome of the battle was already decided, and the end result was always his death. The protagonist tells Yahoo that he will show him kindness by granting him peace of mind and destroys the mask. He asks from where Yahoo got it, but before dying, Yahoo uses his soul-searching ability to investigate the person's memories. He sees that the young master of the Gone family was the one who gave him the mask. Lillian asks if he's okay, and he says yes. She says that if he is really human, Yahoo deserves to die for what he did. The protagonist asks for a place to gather information, and Lillian says that the school library has the largest collection of books. When they arrive, Lillian asks what to do with the car. The protagonist says he doesn't have a license so she can take the car and gets out of the car, telling Lillian to call him next time if there's any problem. He already writes down the number in his phone. That's it for this part. Please subscribe our channel for more amazing videos.